So what you guys just saw is an example of terrible fitment, and that's what we're talking about today, are different parts that you can use and or install, like we're going to do in this video, to help dial in that fitment so you can have the best looking VA WRX STI chassis out there. So first and foremost, what you're going to need is a set of coilovers. One, it helps lower the car. I'm running some Godspeed coilovers. They are fully adjustable, and this is really going to allow you to dial in your camber by using these camber plates up top. So the reason why fully adjustable coilovers are so important to dialing in your fitment is because of this guy right here. This plate allows you to move your strut this way or this way, which is going to give you either positive or negative camber. What we're looking to do is move this guy all the way in this way, and that in turn is going to take our hub here and push it in, giving us negative camber. All right, now the rear of the car is a completely different story. You have to get your adjustability in different ways. So just by design, the rear doesn't have the same adjustability up top that the front coilovers do. So we're gonna have to get our camber by different means, and I'll be showing you guys that here in just a second. All right, so as I mentioned, the rear of the car is a little bit different when needing to add camber, because you can't add camber at the very top of the strut. So that's where these different parts come in. There's technically three ways of adding more camber to the rear of your WRX or STI. The first way is to get rear upper control arms and toe arms, and that rear upper control arm is going to take your wheel and it's going to add camber by pulling it in from the top. The second way of doing things is lower control arms and toe arms. Lower control arms are going to take that wheel and push it out from the bottom, in turn adding more camber. So there's definitely some pros and cons depending on which way you end up going. If you use that upper control arm, it's going to allow your suspension geometry to sit a little bit better, a little bit closer to stock, and it's going to be a little bit more suitable for the car. The only issue with using upper control arms is it tends to be about twice as expensive as doing lower control arms. If you choose the route that I'm doing, which is lower control arms and toe arms, that's the route that usually ends up being a little bit cheaper, and you can kind of get bundle deals like what I'll show you guys, getting lower control arms and toe arms in one package. All right, so this is your lower control arm and this is your toe arm. Thankfully I was able to get them in a package deal, which kind of made things a little bit cheaper, and they both shipped at the same time. So if that's something you guys are able to do, I definitely recommend it. So the lower control arms and toe arms that I bought are actually for an FRS 86 BRZ chassis. And interestingly enough, all of these parts are interchangeable between the two cars. So just something to keep in mind when you are shopping is that these parts will bolt up to either chassis. Alright, so first thing on the agenda is going to be getting this lower control arm out. I'm going to start by unbolting our strut, another bolt here to unbolt from the bottom of the knuckle, and then this bolt on the end there is holds in your sway bar. So let's get all those unbolted and we'll go from there. Alright, so now you can kind of see the difference between stock and obviously not stock. And the important thing is this right here. This doesn't have obviously that adjustability point, and this can either lengthen or shorten. Well, I really can't get any shorter than this, but this is going to push out, which is going to allow us to add more camber. Alright, so for everybody that has an STI that is going to run these same lower control arms, you have this sensor right here that bolts onto your stock lower control arm in this hole right here, and it's only on the driver's side rear, so we're gonna have to drill into this to be able to mount that in. Alright, so if any of you guys are having trouble with this sensor, I'll show you my solution here in a second, but what I'm going to do is unbolt it here and take this bracket off at the bottom here and flip this around and then bolt it to the inside of this. Alright, so it's actually the next day. It ended up getting a little too dark after that last clip to kind of finish filming, but I'll get you guys up to date on what I ended up getting done, and we'll kind of just jump back into things. Alright, so yesterday we were putting in our driver's side lower control arm, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to mount this sensor. And basically what we ended up doing is at the very top, and it's really hard to see it, but there's this little plastic piece, and we took it apart completely, flipped it around, and then I put this bracket on opposite of how it was before, drilled a hole in the lower control arm and just bolted it in from this back side here. And now that this is bolted in, we got the rest of our bolts down here tightened up. We're going to do our tow arm, and then we'll jump onto the passenger side and do the exact same thing. Alright, so next we're going to be replacing our tow arm, and the reason this is so important is because when we go to add camber and we pull the bottom of this out towards us, it ends up screwing with the toe, so adding a tow arm is going to allow us to correct that when we go back and do our alignment later. Alright, so new tow arm is in, really pretty easy. There's 3 bolts. This guy up here, your eccentric bolt back here, which helps adjust camber as well. And then there's like a little 10 mil that holds on your brake line. You can see on the stock control arm, it has this little tab built in that this bolts onto. Obviously, this control arm doesn't, so we're just gonna let this hang. Should be fine. So this is all bolted in. Obviously, our lower control arm is bolted in as well. Jump over to the other side, and as soon as I get the other side done, then we'll kind of move on to what's next. Alright, so we just finished up the lower control arms and tow arms. I'll show you guys that. The tow arm and the lower control arm, both on the passenger side. So the next order of business is going to be getting the fenders rolled. Obviously very important for fitting bigger wheels than what would come stock on the car. Alright, so it's a little bit of time later, and fenders have been rolled. I'll show you guys the fronts here. You can kind of see, you look at it from the front, so a little bit of a bulge. So the fenders have been rolled and pulled on both sides, and then we did just a little bit of light work in the rear. The rears are actually pretty okay the way that they are. So next order of business is going to be getting under the hood and messing with those coilovers, right? So like I was talking about earlier, these plates up top are essential for adding more camber. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen these 4 Allen keys or Allen bolts, and that's going to allow us to move this top hat in to kind of hopefully give us the camber that we need. Otherwise, if we don't get enough here, the top bolt on your strut, and it's a little dark, hopefully you guys can see that, but this top bolt right here is an eccentric bolt, and basically what that means is it's not completely round. The bolt's actually oval shaped, and that oval is going to allow us to kind of push the strut itself from here, you know, in or out, and we can always get a little bit of extra camber that way. So we'll see what we can make happen. So something pretty cool about this set of coilovers, right in between these 2 Allen bolts, there's actually another threaded hole that I can take these front Allen bolts out and put into, giving me more adjustability. Because if you can see this top hat, like there's still some room here, and we want to be able to push this piece all the way to the inside. So as you guys can see, when we moved these inside Allen bolts, that allowed the top of the strut to move in a pretty significant amount. Alright, so even though we adjusted the bolts on the top of the camber plates, it looks like we're probably still going to need to get some more adjustability out of those bottom eccentric bolts that are at the top of the strut. So I'm going to adjust those in, and then we'll start test fitting the wheels. So it's a little bit difficult to explain, but basically this is the top bolt on the bottom of your coil over here, and this is the bolt that's kind of in an oval shape, and this, by turning this either in or out, that's going to allow your strut to move in or out, obviously giving you more camber. So we'll mess with these, and then we'll start test fitting the wheels. Well, it is now day 3. I keep starting on this project super late in the day and I run out of time. So what ended up kind of getting done from what you guys last saw to now, basically, like I said yesterday, we added more camber on the top using the camber plates, and we were going to go in here and add more camber using these eccentric bolts. So basically what we ended up having to do, since we weren't able to get enough camber using these eccentric bolts and adjusting the camber plates up top, we had to slot the struts. And effectively what that means is we just ovaled out the hole that this eccentric bolt bolts into, and that allows us to move the strut in a little bit further. Alright, so before we mount the wheels, I just want to go over what tire size I'm using, what wheels I'm using, and then kind of the wheel specs. So we are running a SSR GTX01. Wheel specs are 18, 10.5, plus 15. I'm running a 235, 40, 18 as far as tire. Honestly, not that crazy amount of a stretch. It's still pretty meaty for what we're going for, but it'll definitely work as far as the fitment that we're kind of looking to achieve. So let's go ahead and get these mounted up and we'll see what happens. Alright, so wheel is all mounted and bolted up. You can see, just without kind of jacking up the car, fitment seems to be pretty okay, and now it'll definitely camber in when the car is on the ground. So what we'll do is we'll throw the jack under the tire, we'll lift it up, and that'll kind of give us a better idea on fitment. But looks like it's shaping up to be pretty half decent. Cool. Let's see what we got now that it's all jacked up. You know what? That looks pretty flush. I think I could probably go a ½ inch lower. I mean, the fitment, I definitely get a finger in here still, so it's not the tightest, but and it's hard to see on camera, but we're probably at like a good -5 or 6 degrees. We'll have to wait till alignment day to see for sure, but it's not bad. I definitely think these wheels suit this car pretty darn well. Alright, so just threw on one of the rear wheels just to see kind of where we were at for a baseline, and we got a long ways to go. So let's jump under the car and start moving stuff. Alright, so with lower control arms, basically what you're going to do is you're going to loosen up this nut, and you're going to loosen up this nut, and the center one is fixed, and that's going, by turning that, that's going to allow this arm to push out. And basically we're going to just throw our wrench on here, and we're going to push out. And by doing that, it's loosening these threads, and that's going to be pushing our lower control arm out. So I'm going to work this for a little bit, and I'll get back to you guys. Alright, so when you guys are adding camber and you're adjusting your lower control arms or doing any modification to your alignment, just understand that a little bit goes a long way. So I probably did, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 full rotations on that fixed nut, and as you can see, we had a decent amount of camber, but it's the wheel is towed in like crazy, obviously. So that's why we have to get those tow arms to help correct this. So let's correct the tow, and we'll kind of see where we're at. Alright, so with toe arms, it's basically the same exact thing. Loosen the nuts on either side, and we're going to be putting our wrench on the center here and turning that, and that's going to be adjusting our wheel. Sometimes with toe arms, just based on the way that they're designed, they can be a little counterintuitive on the way you turn it to adjust for toe. So just spin it one way, see how it's moving your wheel, and if it's not working, then spin it the other way. And obviously that'll help you kind of figure out which way you need to turn your toe arm to help correct things. Alright, so we played around with our toe arms, and obviously, as you can see, the wheel is a lot better just in the way it's fitting. We're gonna have to add a little bit more camber because this, I mean, it's a little bit it's a little too tight. It's actually just sitting on the tire, so we're gonna add a little bit more camber. We'll fix the toe, and we should be pretty good. Alright, well, when you're dealing with fitment and trying to build a stance car, this is the game you play. I have to figure out what we're gonna do here because I'm sitting at like negative 13 degrees right now is what I measured, and like the fitment is great, but considering I'm static, and this is my daily driver, that's gonna be a little tough. So I hate saying this, but and this is at full droop basically. So unfortunately I might have to raise the car just a tad, so I can see about pulling out just a little bit of camber, because I wasn't really planning on running negative 13 or 14 degrees. So I would like to try and keep it about negative 8 or 9. So I guess we'll pull the wheel off and raise the car up, unfortunately. And you guys have to realize, like, if you want a stance car, it is not an easy process, and it is not a fast process. And I'm like probably a good 2.5 hours into just fitting this wheel. So, you gotta make sure you're taking your time. You gotta make sure you're doing things right, or as right as you can, with the means that you have. So, like I said, it's not a quick process. Give yourself enough time to make sure that you can make things fit the way that you want. Take your time. It's worth it, and you'll be happy in the end, I promise. Alright, so a lot of tools out and a lot of time later. I think we are where I want to be. It's sitting at just about negative 10, and we should be able to clear everything without too much rubbing. So I'm going to call it on this side. Obviously it's not the lowest it could be, but I think I'm going to just let it be there for now, and we can always muck around with it later. But this is how she sits, and yeah, I'm just going to repeat the same process on the other side, and when I'm all finished, I'll get back with you guys. Alright, so everything is bolted down, tightened up. I'll kind of give you guys a quick overview. We are at full droop. We're sitting at about negative 8-ish, negative 9. I did get the other side all finished up here. So basically, when it's on the ground, we'll kind of see, but it should be about negative 9, negative 10 in the front, and about negative 6 or 7, or excuse me, negative 9 or 10 in the rear, and about negative 6 or 7 in the front. So let's just work on getting this thing on the ground finally and pull it out of the garage. Well, here she sits. Definitely needs some more camber in the front. gonna have to work on that, but yeah, as you can tell, obviously camber is not matched. So I'm gonna have to try and pull more in the front. The rear sits pretty good. I'll take that. Fitment's not too bad. Like I said, front definitely needs some work. Alright guys, so I know I said I was gonna roll the car out, but honestly I can't leave it the way it is. So jacked up the side, pull the front wheel off, and I'm gonna try and slot the struts a little bit more to add more camber, because am I excited that the car is like on the ground? Absolutely. But I can't. There's no way I can leave it the way it is. I need to try and at least match the camber a little bit more in the front. So pull the wheel off and show you guys what I'm doing. Alright, so basically what we ended up doing was we slotted the top a little bit more. So we ovaled it out inwards, so basically we could push the top of the knuckle in towards the strut. It helped a lot, but the issue is that when you add camber, and you're pulling from the top instead of pushing from the bottom, obviously the wheels aren't going to fit as well because you're pulling camber in from the top instead of pushing out from the bottom. So now the issue we run into is that wheels don't fit on this side like they did, or rather like they do on this side. I mean, the car's jacked up, so it looks a little funky right now, but this has some wheel poke. The other side, it's sunk in a pretty fair amount, so we'll probably end up ordering some little 25 mil spacers that are 5x114 to 5x114, and that'll solve our issue. But I threw the wheel on briefly, and I'll show you guys kind of when we're all finished up here. But camber is a lot closer to being matched when after slotting the front strut a little bit more. So I'm gonna throw the wheel on back on this side, try to fix, there's a lot of toe out, so I'm gonna try and fix that, do it on the other side, and then I'll show you guys the finished product. Alright, so I'm gonna show you guys how the car sits. It's about -10 in the rear and about -7 in the front. I have a little bit more adjustability I can get out of the front because I slotted those struts, but the issue is that the back of the wheel is hitting the coilover. So I ordered a couple of 20 mil spacers, and those should be here by the end of the week. So as soon as those come in, I can pull more camber in the front and hopefully get it a little bit closer. So I'll show you guys kind of what we're working with. So as you guys saw earlier, about -10 in the rear, and in the front we're at about -7. So ordered 20 mil. This is the gap I gotta fill. It's about 2 fingers, so hopefully we'll be able to take care of that at the end of the week. But until then, I'm glad the camber at least is a little, you can kind of see it. I know the background's a little blown out, but you can kind of see it's obviously not the same, but it matches a little bit better than it did before. That's pretty much gonna wrap it up as far as the basics on building a Stance VA chassis STI or WRX. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I'll do my best to reply to you guys, and that being said, you guys have a good one.